Hello, everyone, and welcome. People are still coming in from the waiting room, so we'll get started in just a minute once I think everybody is here. My name is Billy, and I am the founder and organizer of Bookstore Romance Day, and thank you all so much for joining us today. I think this is going to be a fantastic conversation. Wow, there are a lot of you. This is great. So it looks like the counter has stopped. Once again, my name is Billy. I am the founder and organizer of Bookstore Romance Day, and I want to thank you all for being here. If you have any questions for the panelists during the event, please put them in the Q&A that you will find at the bottom of your screen. If you put them in the chat, they will likely get lost. So please, please, please make sure to put them in the Q&A, and we will get to as many of them as we can during the session. I will also be posting a link to the bookshop list where you can purchase any of the author's books. And now I am going to sit back and shut up and turn this over to Olivia. Take it away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Gaining Losing Magic panel. We've got a lot of things going on. We have authors C.L. Polk, Kit Rocha, Eva Leigh, Jessie Mihalik, Stephanie Burgis, and Leslye Penelope here today. I'm Olivia Waite. I'm the New York Times romance fiction columnist, as well as an author and critic. I'm just going to jump right in. The first question that I have when I came up with the idea for this panel was, is there a difference between seeing somebody lose a magic power and seeing somebody gain a magic power? And I want to start with, because we were all readers first, every writer I know started as a reader. Was there a particular book you remember when somebody either gained a magical power or, say, dragon, or lost one that really hit you as a reader? C.L. Polk?
Can we please talk about Aurora Monroe right now?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
when Storm lost her powers, I realized it's a comic book and I realized this was the 80s, but this is when I was reading it. I was heartbroken. Heartbroken. And then she proceeded to be awesome without her power anyway for like a few comic book episodes. But when I heard gaining and losing magic, I immediately thought of Aurora Monroe.
Can you give us some background? I mean, I'm a nerd who's not familiar with comics too much. I know
Okay, so
I know who Storm is, but
yeah, Aurora Monroe is one of like the very first reset of the Uncanny X-Men. She is Storm. She controls weather. She flies. She's black. She's amazing. And the X-Men usually had a within the team leader, and Storm was the team leader for a little while. And then she lost her power, and that was always sus to me. She did get it back with the help of a boyfriend. But you know, it was the 80s. This is the kind of things that they did.
Yep, Stephanie, and people just jump in. You don't have to wait. I'm not the teacher of this classroom. Please go ahead.
It's also the 80s. And something that C.L. Polk just said, it reminded me of my first experience with that kind of storyline, which is in Lloyd Alexander's final Taran book, where I'm going to mispronounce this horribly, and it's humiliating because I live in Wales, but I've never met anyone named this in real life here. So Eilonwy, the heroine, it's been many years since I read it, but I still remember this feeling of bitter disappointment that she had to give up her magic at the end to stay with Taran. And it's sort of oh, you're getting married. This is real life. Take away the magic. This is settle down.
A face.
Yeah.
I'm making a face. Everyone saw it. I couldn't help it.
Immediately thinking of your books.
Yeah, and it's interesting that those are both connected with, like, advancing a romantic relationship as well. Because mine, for me, was in the Pern series, which I know Kit Rocha knows about. There's a character named Breck, and she's a dragon rider. She has this big, massive, powerful queen dragon that's then killed horribly because some other woman is too sexy. Short version. But yeah, no, it's punishing somebody for wanting sex too much, and dragons fight and dragons die. And she only really kind of, like, she's verging on suicidal for a long time, and she only really kind of gets power back through her relationship with another dragon rider, and she's actually able to talk like psychically to all the dragons, which most people can't do. But it's always like she kind of falls off of the events stage and becomes like a side character, as opposed to like riding the massive, biggest, most important type of dragon. And so it does feel like romantic relationships force a downgrade in a woman's powers in a lot of these
And that
examples.
one especially, I'm gonna tell you guys, like, I think a lot of us have probably read 70s, 80s, 60s fantasy, and you revisit it as an adult and you're like, oh no. But that romance is the biggest oh no I've ever had. He is my biggest betrayal, Fëanor, because like I loved him as a teenager and I went back as an adult and I'm like, oh no. There was no consent involved in this. This was bad. And then she loses all of her but it really did stick with me, definitely. It's the, who are you when you lose the thing that defines you? And I did like that she got something else, but it definitely felt like it was a cool power, like, because most of the people, if you're not familiar with the series, everybody like has a bond with like one dragon, and you can talk to your dragon, but she can talk to all of them, which is like a cool power. But I feel like the book didn't think that it was the same sort of status. Yeah, and I would have loved to see that, like, upgraded her.
Yeah, like, if she'd been able to become like a leader among all the, like, if she could like unite all the different little dragon rider enclaves, like the big communications thing, like we've seen C.L. Polk mentioned comics, and I know Oracle, like when she's injured, she ends up becoming like a communication specialist and is still valuable to the narrative. And they didn't do it, just felt like, oh, you don't have a dragon, you don't count anymore.
I wonder if, thinking about just sort of like the trajectory of this narrative, of the like the loss or acquisition of power, and we're thinking about some of the early narratives that we like in fantasy and romance, and and even in cinema and stuff like that, and television, like this sort of loss of power was something that I felt I saw a lot more of in those earlier narratives. And then as we're kind of been moving into like the late 90s and the aughts and into the teens and beyond, the sort of like the acquisition of power, particularly when it comes to characters who identify as female, like the acquisition of power becomes a more prevalent narrative arc that we see, rather than the stripping away. Like I kept thinking of like The Last Unicorn, or even like the Disney 1980s Little Mermaid. It's like, okay, you can be integrated into the domestic sphere once the power is stripped away. And then we're seeing like the rise of this narrative where like the characters they gain power a lot with the female characters in these sort of later things, and maybe that has like it's kind of changed the nature of our relationship to how we view particularly empowered women. So that was just something that I was thinking about as we were having this discussion.
Well, thinking about go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say, like, even in more modern stuff like Terry Pratchett's Discworld, Magrat Garlic, one of the witches, has to give up the witching when she becomes queen, but then later kind of starts slipping into a more maternal witch role in several books. And then that makes me also think of Stephanie Burgis's Witch Queen, which is a whole different take on this.
Yes, that was my response to all those 80s fantasies I grew up on, where I was like, but what if the really powerful, cool, person was the heroine instead of the hero?
Well, I feel like a lot of times, like that sort of, like we've heard in discussion about romance, it's like, or just in certain writing spheres, that like spite is often this motivating factor when it comes to constructing our own narratives, because we're like, I didn't like the way that was handled, and so for me, or for when it's my turn at bat, I'm going to take a different course. Like maybe it's the same play, but I'm going to do it a little bit differently. So I know that like when I was young and watching a lot of like cable television unsupervised, I would watch these things and I would think like, oh, I don't like the way particularly the female characters were depicted, and so I want to do that differently when it comes to writing my own narratives. I like so maybe Stephanie, and like with all of us, I think, I don't know, I don't want to speak for all of us, but there's like that kind of idea of like okay, but what if, and then we move forward with our particular point of view.
It's like, I don't really have a clear thought on this, but I want to throw it out there and see if anybody can catch me while I fall. I was just thinking about how, like, with more modern narratives, it's like we have these characters, particularly women, who discover or find out or are even told that they have an ability that like nobody else has. Like, I'm gonna like throw it all the way back to the movie Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where this cheerleader is told that they are the destined slayer and they have the mark and they're like, oh, that ugly oh, I got that removed. But like had no idea that any of this was going on until somebody came along and told her that that was what she was supposed to do. And this is what I'm thinking about. It's like, how often is too often when the story is like, hi women, we're going to give you a power and it's going to mean that like all of the things that you want to do in your life are now gone. You get to hunt vampires now.
Right.
And trust me, you're going to love it. um like, do we still see that sort of thing going on where it's like when like women specifically get a special ability, the immediate expectation is that they use it to serve humankind.
Yeah, not their own ambition.
Not their own ambitions.
Yeah,
they have to throw those away
Right.
to like go save the world or something boring like that.
Like
well,
if you,
and that's
oh, go on.
Oh, who wants to go?
I was just gonna say, if you think about like hero's journey, it made me think of Luke Skywalker. You know, he's got these ambitions that require him to have this special ability and leave, and he's always wanted to leave. Very rarely do you have women wanting to leave in that way, and it's like the special ability that requires this sacrifice. In male-driven narratives, often it's a good thing. It's great. It gets me out of this provincial town or this backwater planet and lets me have an adventure. And for women, like, you know, it doesn't seem to be that like this wonderful thing. Maybe it ends up net positive at the end of the story, but for a long time, it's about them. It subsumes everything that they wanted. I think that Polk had a great point about that.
Yeah,
Right.
there's a great question in the Q&A from Maria Vale, who's also an author. Hi, Maria. And she asks, is this a continuation of the trope of loss of magic paralleling the loss of virginity or purity?
That's an interesting one.
There is like, I feel like there's an interesting arc, because like we were talking about like they were losing it and then they were gaining it. But when you asked the question originally, my first thought was, man, I just can keep thinking of stories where women like get power and it's terrible, which is kind of like what C.L. Polk was just saying, but like the punishment aspect of it. Women get too much power and they go crazy. The Dark Phoenix, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, I hated that storyline.
Yeah.
So
Oh
much.
my gosh.
Women are
I'm currently working on
incapable.
reclaiming that. Sorry, Stephanie. I was just like, I'm trying to reclaim Dark Phoenix. Go on, Bree. I'm sorry.
Well, and I think that there is a tie in that, like innocence, you know, innocent women aren't being punished the way powerful women are. By like having this power has to make you unstable. Like we're not capable of dealing with being that powerful. The super powerful waif, and like since we were talking about Buffy, Joss Whedon loves the super powerful waif.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, you know, makes her she's so got all this power, but she's still unstable and can't take care of herself.
That darn uterus wandering around everywhere.
Yeah, it's either the virginity or the menopause, but either way.
Yeah, and I feel like you don't see this as much with male characters. Like they can be incredibly powerful and like until they reach like the villain point or whatever, but they don't have the like, oh, we've gone too powerful. But somehow when a woman character gets powerful, then all of a sudden like it's too much and she can't handle it. And I don't love those stories personally.
It almost feels like, oh,
Go on.
sorry.
Please.
The opposite of what Maria was saying. It's like power is coded as negative. So the purity virgin is like, you know, the good girl. But so like losing it is losing magic, gets you back to that state of purity. You know, that it feels like you can kind of see it in two different ways. But the way that they're vilified for having the power when like, oh, you should just stay home and actually stay weak and stay quiet.
I was thinking about when we were talking about that, like in the 1940s and into the 50s with like film noir, this rise of like the femme fatale versus the good girl, and like this sort of correlation between like during the war when a lot of women had to fill roles of like they actually had to they were finally allowed out of the home, and they could be taxi drivers, or they could be short order cooks, or like all, or like any like these multiple job openings that women could fill. And then at the end of the war, they're like, oh, no, 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 get back in, like go home. And like the power of women coded as this femme fatale, like this woman who is empowered, who ultimately winds up being the thing that can often cost the hero his life, because she is so it was just like it was like tangentially, it made me think of the way in which when women gained power, or like with the in the 70s when women started working outside of the home, and then how was that depicted in film and things like that, like the sort of reactionary take on when power by women is acquired, and then like, okay, well we gotta reel that back in, or punish them or something.
I was actually reading Janice Radway's original like book about romance from like 1984, 1991 recently. And
Oh, reading the romance?
Reading the romance,
Yeah.
which makes me stabby. But
Oh, yeah.
one of the things she says in the really good section about print history is she mentions the femme fatale, she mentions the anxiety about women's agency during the war, and she says the women's response to this was the Gothic. That women being forced back into the home is what led to this surge of popularity in Gothic narratives. And so all of those like Victoria Holt style classic 70s,
having to flee the castle down
fleeing the castle with the nightgown. Yeah, because now like being forced back into the home by somebody with a
The
mysterious
home is dangerous. Yeah.
Right,
and
exactly,
the violent
exactly.
past, all the men coming back from war traumatized and having killed people, and now they're trying to reintegrate with society, and how is that going to impact the domestic sphere?
I think
I
it's
was
interesting. Oh,
I
go on.
was howling over the back of one of these like classic gothic novels that was coming out. I don't believe it was a Victoria Holt, where it was like this woman was like literally packed away in a carriage to go marry a man whose name was Lord Satan. And she's like, surely he can't be that bad. And I was just like,
That's one of the satanic gothics Avon it was issuing in the 70s. They had
oh yeah,
specifically a line of satanic gothics with a little goat head logo.
Wow.
Well, that goes right back to the first, like these 18th century fairy tales written by upper class women, like Beauty and the Beast, where it's all about, how scary it is to go off to this arranged marriage, this guy who seems like an absolute beast, but maybe
and
it'll
that
all be okay.
It's her job to renovate him into like a actual being who's fit for human company.
Yeah.
I was thinking when Eva was talking about working outside the home, like in Black families where women worked outside the home forever, it's different. And I think if you look at like Toni Morrison and Alice Walker and Gloria Naylor, when they're writing things that are speculative but not considered fantasy necessarily, but there's this magical tradition, and women as sort of magic workers, as like folk magic workers, it's not the same kind of crone trope. You get like more respect in the community. You're at a higher level in the community. And I wonder if there's a parallel there between, culturally, like Black women always had to work outside of the home. And when they were performing magic, it was perceived as more of a positive thing. Sometimes, and there's definitely connotations of negativity in the community as well, but people go to them for help, and they're not off in the woods as a head witch. They are in places of a little bit more prominence in the community, which is, I think, is an interesting juxtaposition.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because a lot of the films from the 1940s were obviously, in the early 50s, were like the representation of the characters was obviously very, very narrow. So they were excluding other narratives, So that's, yeah.
And there's a really interesting history to be written about how like Black magical traditions, and specifically voodoo, are depicted in romance and fantasy. Like, man, I'd read that book tomorrow. Like,
I would also read that book tomorrow. Like if I like I think it's there, but just like I'm thinking about specifically, I can't remember the title. Andrea Hishton wrote a novel that is basically like the American road trip novel, except with magic, except everybody's black. And like you can find it. It's just that uh, these are not the books that are getting billboards on Times Square. You know what I mean?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I saw someone in chat mentioned Marion Zimmer Bradley, who
Yeah.
very messed up
Yeah.
legacy. But she did. A lot of times people are talking about how women weren't writing fantasy in the 70s and 80s. And I read almost
Which
exclusively
is nonsense.
fantasy by women. And it's
Same.
because the sword and sorceress books, I would go and I would find them and I would look up every woman who was in them. And then I would go find books by them. And that was my Google in the 80s,
Yep.
you know? And I do hate how much that feels a little tarnished to me because she definitely.
Oh, yeah. If you don't know already, don't Google. It's nasty.
If you don't know, don't Google.
It's real bad. Just skip.
Yeah, it is. It's very bad. I spent a lot of time in secondhand bookstores when I was buying books because it was like, look, if I've got $12, I can get one book or I could get 6 books. And so the choice was clear. And so I know I didn't really do it on purpose, but it would be like I would look at a book and I would look at the art and I would read the back and I would read the front and I would take it home because it looked interesting. And I just kind of accidentally created a bookshelf full of science fiction and fantasy authors that were women. Like I didn't go out of my way to try to do it. It's just that this was the stuff that was appealing to me. And like I didn't notice until like some boy was in my room and they were like, this is the weirdest bookshelf I've ever seen. These look like science fiction and fantasy novels, but like, and then he would like pull one out and he was like, this is actually a book. And I have never heard of it. I've never heard of any of these people. And
That
I
was
was
my
just
same
kind of like,
experience when I went to college, and I'd meet guys and I'd say, "Oh yeah, I love fantasy," and he loves fantasy. What a great thing we've got in common! Except he has no idea who any of my favorite authors are because they're women.
Yes.
You know?
like none whatsoever. So like instead of it being like I read the Pern books, of course. But my big thing was Tanith Lee.
Oh yeah.
She was my big thing.
Silver
If
medal
I
lover.
saw
Yeah.
like yellow spines that said "Daw" on the side, I was making a beeline for it just in case it was a Tanith Lee that I didn't have already. And I was thinking also earlier about the idea of how um the gaining of power or the loss of power can interfere with a literary heroine's identity. Because I'm thinking of Tanith Lee's
Yeah.
first book, The Birth Grave, where she literally wakes up, she doesn't remember anything about who she is, except that she is bad. She doesn't know her name and she has to find her enemy. And also she's very ugly, so she has to cover her face all of the time. And she goes around and she just winds up doing all of these mad sword and sorcery type adventures, like the most hair-raising chariot race description I've ever read, where she's not the one who's actually driving the chariot. She's on the back of the chariot with a bow and arrow trying to sabotage everybody else in the race. And she's got like a little shield and she's got a bow, and her idea is like, you got to take out as many of these people as possible so that we win and we get all this money and glory and blah blah blah. And she does it, and then she goes and she does this. She's an amazing fighter, and all through this thing she's on the quest to find her enemy. And when she finally gets to the end, she realized that the enemy that she's was looking for was herself before she forgot. With her full power and her full ability and the society that she was a part of that was like broken by people, and that the power was in her kind of all along, but it wasn't like this is the magic MacGuffin we're going to get to at the end because we've run out of steam at the end of the movie. Now click these shoes together. It's there through the whole thing. She doesn't realize how powerful she is until she gets to the end and she faces all of it, that her enemy was herself. And like I think this is kind of like the central theme of a lot of Tanith Lee's like early adventure books, is that all of these women are looking for power, and in the end they find themselves, and that is the power.
And even in the sci-fi, like Silver Medal Lover, like it's not like a very driven quest. They're just kind of the main characters just kind of unsettled and dissatisfied and is led into these like complete like acts of social rebellion that get attacked. But it's mostly just out of dissatisfaction until she finally like has an identity she can feel stable in.
Hmm. Yeah, because until then she wasn't really allowed to have one.
Yeah. Yeah, you're just supposed to be having fun thoughtlessly all the time in that book. And this brings up something interesting as well. So we were talking before about women's power being expected to serve some greater cause. So is there a difference, you think, between a response that says, well, I'm seeing women and female characters having to lose their power, so I'm going to give mine a ton of power, versus, well, I'm seeing that power being co-opted structurally, and so therefore resisting the use of power is the thing to do. Am I being clear here?
I get what you're saying. Yeah, I think there's a line there, and I think that overcorrection over the decades explains a lot, because I think, like you said, like we've all expressed, we read something, we get mad, we go in the other direction, and then the next generation reads us and they get mad and they swing back and forth. And I feel like if I look through the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, you can see us like trying to find this needle where we get to have power, but it doesn't make us beholden to the world.
Mhm.
We get to have power and we get to be us, you know. And I
And
do
at the
think
same
that's
time, you don't want to
hard
end up with a
one.
heroine who's like an Elon Musk would be, you know.
Yeah, like the
You don't want to
specialist,
go that
yeah,
far.
the specialist bestest girl kind of a thing. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that the idea of like the Mary Sue sort of comes out of probably trying to correct and overcorrecting, and the pendulum does swing kind of back and forth. Like the whatever that's the social issue that you're trying to discuss or comment on the day. Yeah, are we going too far? Kind of looking at like early work, I think we've all been in this for a while. Do we look at our early work and kind of critique it and like, I was going for something there and maybe I did too much, and maybe the past couple of years I'm reeling it back a little bit.
Oh yeah.
I love when writers like try and rewrite their older books on the sly where we can see it in public. Like one of
Is
my
anybody
favorite things.
reading Nalini Singh's Psy Changeling books?
Yes,
Because
yes.
I feel like the second season, like I actually recently restarted rereading some of the very earliest ones. And it's so fascinating because you can see her doing a thing. And then in the Trinity book, she does it again, but she has learned so much and she has so much more nuance. And it's like the first book was kind of the rough attempt, and then the new book is just beautiful. And so I feel like that series is so fascinating because there's 25 of them now, plus all the novellas
32
or something.
maybe?
There's so many of them.
Yeah, I have a
But
whole podcast on this series. Yes, I've been rereading
You
them.
do?
Yeah, me and my
I love
friend.
those books so much.
Please drop the link to the podcast.
Yes,
I'm going to
please.
go get it immediately.
Yes.
But to see her evolution and sort of starting at the beginning, and we're like, okay, well, this was, what was it, 20 years ago when she started writing them.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a great
I just
example.
reread Clay's book, and the first time through, Clay and I were like, ugh. But this time I can see what she was trying to do.
Yeah, he's still not my favorite, but yeah, I could see.
Yeah, there was a slut-shamey aspect to that book that was real hard for me to swallow. But having read a new version of it, I can say, okay, this is what she was going for. And the 2000s was a rough time for paranormal romance.
Yeah, it's true.
We were paranormaling too close to the sun in the 2000s. So
yeah, but that's really every author's dream, right? Is to improve and be able to look back on your old books and be like, I could have done that better. We hope that we're getting better and that we're, threading that needle, as you said, swinging back and forth and getting closer to what we were aiming for. And the fact that Nalini, whose books I adore, has had such a long career to be able to do that, and just we could see that growth is incredible. And I hope that we all get there. That's the goal.
Absolutely. Well, it's like reading Nora Roberts, and the Nora Roberts books of the 90s are very different from the Nora Roberts books of the 2020s. And I really admire that about her, and there are books from the 90s that I'm no longer, as happy to read, but I very much like the way she does relationships now.
Yeah, the nostalgia factors can be like, especially when you read books as like, a kid, and they hit you really hard, and then you revisit them as an adult and you're like, oh no.
Yeah, that's why I've not read the Pern books again, because I did read them as a kid. And because Bree was like, no, I was like, I'm never going to read those books again. Like, in my mind, they're amazing. And just for anybody who doesn't know, they're not amazing. Please don't go read them now. They are amazing, but they're of their time. So, and of their time, it needs a lot of content warnings.
And
like
their time is like the 70s. Like,
that's
their
real,
time is a long time ago now. It makes us feel old, but that's like.
Yeah, so I'm never ever gonna read those books again, because in like child me, like loved those. I would go to the library, I would find the new ones, like it was incredible. It was this world with dragons and magic, and it was awesome.
Women having adventures.
Yeah,
women having adventures.
I will never go back and read them, because I know that it will just completely tarnish that memory for me.
Yeah, that's the problem with writing being an ongoing conversation, is we've had that conversation and that's not where we are now. And sometimes you can pull things back from the past that speak to the present in a really meaningful way. Like Toni Morrison has been in a lot of different conversations lately for a lot of different reasons.
Sometimes when I think about that, because like I wrote a series of historical romances that were kind of based on like 80s films and tropes and things like that. Yes, get out of here. And so I rewatched a lot of these films, and they were deeply distressing, highly problematic, a lot of these 80s films. And so what I was thinking about when I was approaching it is like, what did it mean to me? It's about the relationship I had at that moment. And then I can revisit it and rethink that. But it's like, I'm not necessarily like, it's not an homage, but it's thinking about like my own, like my journey as a consumer and a creator, and I think about that in terms of the relationship. So like I can leave these works behind, but I can think about what they made me feel. And then I can also think about how I can reevaluate my own position and my relationship to them, to see all of the problematic aspects that I want to discard or correct or, address as best as I possibly can.
So
I
then
went to a wonderful, sorry.
No, go for it.
I was just going to say, I went to a wonderful online workshop by the author Sarah Locke, and I think she's still offering these regularly. I definitely recommend them. It's a beat burnout workshop for authors. And one of the exercises that really stands out in my memory from this was, she said, without thinking too hard, first just make a list of the things that got you most excited as a reader, as a kid, or or not even just in reading, but like in movies also. So I remember writing down Fox Robin Hood, things like this. And then she's like, okay, now write down like 3 things that you remember really enjoying, whatever. And you sort of tie these all together, and you're like, oh yeah, you don't have to like go back and think, oh, these books are perfect, whatever. But what you're doing as an author is you're thinking, what lights me up, what makes me happy and excited, and what makes me want to create my own stuff.
Right. I think I can't remember the name of the author and like the person who gave the presentation, but there's a presentation a few years ago about like your id, the relationship of your id to your work.
Jennifer Lynn Barnes.
Yes, I mean, and that was really a very intriguing concept of like thinking about what are these core narratives, what are these aspects, what are these things that make us return to them, and maybe kind of bringing it back to, and like how does that engage with our id, and bringing it back to this notion of characters, particularly female characters, finding power, like that this is a concept that we like to return to, because it's something that on a very like sort of fundamental id level is like, yes, this is what I would like for myself. Perhaps I would like to see sort of enacted in the world, and then we sort of embody it in the narratives that we create.
Do you take a different approach to this kind of question if you're approaching it, say, when you're imagining a future versus when you're imagining something historically? because I know a lot of us write like paranormal historicals and things that are reimagining the past as well as the future.
I mean, for myself, it's definitely an alternative timeline. Like, wouldn't it be great if, witches banded together to defeat racist colonialists? Yes, I would really like to have seen that, like, and like perhaps it's a way of sort of embodying and envisioning a future timeline where these forces become, we can, through our own particular kind of magic, if you will, we can create an alternate timeline which nudges the needle and pushes us in a direction that is hopeful.
And I think when I'm writing the past, I'm kind of trying to focus on a piece of it. If I'm writing, been writing in our world in the past. And so like when I teach world building, it's like, yeah, even if you're writing in our world, even if you're writing contemporary in our world, you are choosing, like you're making a version of it. So it's not technically alternate history or alternate present, but it is always. So it's like, okay, we can re-envision a better past in the same way that we can envision a better future by the lens that we're using, by zooming in on a piece of it. And for better or for worse, some people zoom in on a piece of it in excluding things that are uncomfortable for them and they just don't want to deal with and pretend that didn't exist in that past. You can do that with, like Regency romance when there's everybody's white. You can choose to create that version of the past. So you can do it, it's like a neutral, and you kind of figuring out, okay, what do you want to focus on in the past and also in the future. And in terms of, I've done secondary world fantasy where, my first series is secondary world fantasy. And like, I think some of the choices that I made 12, 13 years ago when I was first writing those books and sort of mimicking a lot of the issues that we have now, I might not do if I was writing that again. Like I was writing a whole subplot, where LGBT people are not included in society, and that's important to certain characters. These days, when I write queer characters in the past, I have them be included because I'm not interested in seeing that, that particular struggle again and again. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think envisioning this section of society in, say, 1925, where these people were okay with their queer friends, and like there's a benefit to that as well.
It's also which part of the history you're focusing on, because I completely agree with you on every piece of this. And it's just thinking about, I remember having a conversation a few years ago, and I'm not naming any names, but I read a book which was very, very beautifully written. And I hated the treatment of the single gay character in this historical novel. And especially as it was aimed at children now, and thinking about what they're going to be picking up from this. And I talked to the author because we knew each other, and she was convinced that this was the only way gay people had ever been treated in this time period. But as it happens, I actually, for my own reasons, because I am bi and because I'm a nerd, when I was in college, I did a lot of reading of academic, histories of, gay society and, that was going on in exactly this time period. And it's not only that, gay people could in fact have happy lives, even if they weren't getting married in the, town church, but, but they in fact also had plenty of friends who were not gay, but knew that they were gay and didn't, it's when you pick out one particular piece of history as being true. And like this author, who I believe was well-meaning, but to my eyes less knowledgeable, she was basing it on what she had been told by her grandparents about that time period, which that it was never allowed. And I believe that for them, in their part of society, they thought this is true. But I also believe there are other gay people living there that they didn't necessarily know about. Just like when I was at Michigan State and I was about to transfer to Oberlin College, I remember this girl saying to me, "But Stephanie, there are gay people there." And I was like, "Honey, there are gay people right here in MSU, I promise, in this room, even."
This makes me think about it. And most of us have been in the romance sphere long enough that we probably know exactly what I'm talking about, but I'm going to be vague. When someone said that they couldn't write diverse historicals because they didn't want to write about people being miserable. And they did this on a stage next to Beverly Jenkins.
Yeah,
whose
literally next to
entire
Beverly Jenkins. Yeah.
backlist is a repudiation of the idea that people have not been joyful and loving in any circumstance you can imagine. And if anybody out there has not read a Beverly Jenkins book, that is like your first task after you leave this chat, is you need to go find one. Because, and she has contemporary, she has historical, she has written across all these different time periods. And she doesn't say, well, bad things weren't happening, but she says, we were loving no matter what was going on around us. And that is true for so many communities, but you know.
And it's such
exactly
a powerful message now too. It's like the world can be terrible. You know, things can be massively unjust, but that doesn't mean that you can't find joy, and finding joy is a subversive act in the times when people are trying to crush people like you.
I actually went on an absolute binge this past summer where I decided, you know, I'm going to try just this first novel from the Blessings series, and like 11
Famous
books
last
later,
words.
like I'm on NetGalley, like slamming the request button for the upcoming one. Like I haven't binged a series like that in probably 15 years. It was nonstop. And it was so simple. It's like, yeah, elderly Black divorcee gets a huge divorce settlement and buys a historically Black small town and starts fixing everything. And it's such a simple premise. And she's like, oh yeah, time to get a bunch of foster kids out of the foster care system, and we're going to have them raised by the town. And I'm like, I cannot stop reading this. It's the simplest possible form of drama, and I'm absolutely hooked. I'm like, oh, but what if that teenager's going to say something mean? He's thinking mean things. I've seen him. Like, and it was incredible. And it was dealing with the past, and they were like, some of these characters were descendants from some of the characters in her historical. So I'm like, oh my gosh, it's the July. So it like felt like discovering old friends. It was some of the most fun I've had reading in just the longest time. And it got me seriously thinking about how we approach the past versus the future. Because like you have these two, like the Beverly Jenkins extended universe, or she's kind of coming at this question from both ends. What does it mean for characters in the past to be building like a legacy during a time when, you know, when Jim Crow was so active? And what does it mean to be characters who've inherited all of the struggle and all of the like the hope and the determination that these characters have passed down through the generations? And it was just, amazing. And it's all contemporary. There's no like fantasy elements, but something about the scope of the world building and what it means to take power and to feel active and empowered in your own world felt very like, and Beverly Jenkins reads a ton of sci-fi and fantasy. So like
She does.
So I don't think it's a coincidence that the structure of the world building matched up.
She does have a dragon novella out there, doesn't she? I swear she does.
God, I hope so.
I'm gonna have to go find. I
like,
swear
what?
she does somewhere. A short story or a novella.
Oh, amazing.
But I don't think I'm hallucinating this. I swear that I saw this at some point. I have to go find it. I will find it and put it everywhere. But yeah, I think that she is one of those examples of world building is not something that you just have in speculative fiction. And
Right.
I think a lot of people think that contemporary romance authors aren't building worlds, and that's just not true. Like Leslye said, you're picking which part of the world you're showing, and by doing that, you're making very deliberate choices.
And yeah, and contemporary, as it ages, becomes historical. Like when you read a 1950s category romance now, you know it's the 1950s. It's not like that's why no Dickens character uses a telephone. It's historical now. It just is.
Well, when I still remember I was working on a Regency set story set in Bath, and I reread Northanger Abbey, and I was cursing Jane Austen because she said, everyone knows what Bath looks like, so there's no point wasting time on a description.
Well, I think about that actually just like in terms of like that world building, you know, what we elide and what we include, and like in terms of all of the kinds of narratives that we write, you know, the depth of that and how magic plays into that, and how characters' empowerment or relationship to society, or, you know, all of that. I think they all sort of like, because something's like, oh, well, you know, and it's like, no, you know, like, especially when we're creating these sort of magical worlds, we do have that sort of like power to construct the world as we need it, you know, or what serves the narrative, you know what I mean? So that elision doesn't like, you know, we can either decide what we want to kind of like hand wave away and what we want to include. And like Leslye was saying, it's like that's part of the lens, that's part of the focus, you know what I mean? It's like this is something that's important to the character's arc or the narrative arc or the, you know, societal structure or something like that. So we're going to focus. I'm not going to tell you everything about how an outhouse works, but I am going to tell you, because like, okay, whatever, but like we need to know about, you know, the way in which this village operates, so that like how do they choose the people who go to the Fae court, or like all, you know what I mean, like all these things, like this is all part of like the paring away or addition that we do. And it's it can be a painstaking process, because you're like, oh, I didn't need to include that, or oh, you know what, I probably should have put that in there, you know.
And this ties into one of the questions from the Q&A from Aaron, which is, when you're creating magic systems in your work, how do you determine who gets the magic and who doesn't, or how it is gained and lost? Like, and whether, I'm going to expand a little and say, do you prefer magic that is a system, or do you prefer a more fluid, organic kind of structure?
We definitely, in our most recent series, made a really deliberate choice to not have magic based on bloodlines or inheritance or anything, because I do think that that's one of those things where, you know, if it's constantly replicated unthinking, it can get a little weird, you know, where people have like this sort of genetic legacy of being powerful or not. Right. And so that was something we did try to like think about, where you've got magic, and like in our system, it's literally based on dreaming, like people who hope really hard and dream really hard and have like big ideas. And I honestly was inspired by it because of the romance community, when in 2020, when we did that auction thing and everybody just kind of lost their minds and raised $500,000 in like 3 weeks. And I was thinking, it's just like the power of a bunch of people who really feel strongly about something. And so that was sort of like what we were playing with and what we expanded on. And I had a lot of fun doing that. But, you know, I've also done the you inherit it or whatever. But the fun part about doing magic that is based on your own dreams and your own interaction with the world is that we basically got to, since there was no bloodline powerful thing, we basically had the mortals invent heterosexuality. People kept saying that there was a plot hole because, like, you know, I don't know. I'm totally lost. Sorry, you guys. I have a fever.
Oh, no.
But yeah, like we didn't have to do a thing where queerness was unnatural or anything. Like the entire history of the world, it was normalized that you just get together with whoever you want to get together. And then a bunch of people started thinking, we need to find a way to get magic. And so they invented forced heterosexuality. And that was our world where, you know, it didn't exist before that. And so I enjoyed that opportunity.
I feel like utilizing magic can also like give us this opportunity to really lean into allegory or metaphor.
Yeah.
In a way that, you know, enables us to kind of like explore things that are significant or important to us. That maybe like it's one of the things I enjoy about writing these sort of alternate reality kinds of worlds, like when I've done steampunk or sci-fi or things like that, is that I can fashion the world as I like it, and I can also like lean heavily into the allegorical meaning of the work.
Yeah, it's also it's a way to explore things. I mean, it can be used in all sorts of ways depending on the situation. But I know for myself, the first fantasy romance novella that I ever published, Snowspelled, I wrote it, you know, so it is, in fact, it's related to this plot. It's about the heroine has lost her magic before it starts, and it's completely traumatic. It was not due to a romance. I won't get into like all the details. However, in the wake of it, she broke her engagement. She pushed aside everyone she could. She's, and it's because I lost what gave my life meaning. What's the point of me anymore? And she had like, the story is her finding the point of her, it's her finding happiness and fulfillment in a different way. And it was interesting because I had a mix of readers' reactions, because a lot of readers were really surprised that, spoiler, she does not get her magic back in the end. And I had a lot of chronically ill readers write and say, thank you for that. And it was the fact is, I have ME, also called CFS, and I was I wasn't ready to write about that in fiction exactly, but this was a really wonderfully cathartic way to talk about the emotions, of this kind of thing, where your life changes and you're not okay with it. And what are you going to do now?
Yeah, that some things can't be fixed and some things can't be like hand waved away.
Right. But you can still find other ways to be happy and fulfilled, and you can reinvent yourself, and
yeah, it's a pivot. It's not a cul-de-sac.
Exactly.
And I think, the magic often, when I write it, especially, and I think what I'm hearing from other people, it's like it mirrors the thing you want to talk about, right? So if you want to talk about power systems, then maybe you do have an inherited magic system where people are inheriting magic and they're using that to wield power. Or if you want to talk about egalitarianism, maybe you don't have an inherited magic system. And maybe there's a story about a character who has something that, feels like it wrecks their life and they don't overcome it. They have to live with the new normal because you want to talk about that. So really magic just becomes this clay that we mold our stories around, and then it, we kind of manipulate it in certain ways, but hopefully it comes organically through the characters. And I definitely find I'm doing that. I'm doing standalones recently where I'm creating new magic systems in each book, which is really fun because I get to explore a different aspect of whatever thing I'm thinking about, right? The book I'm writing right now is about power systems and control and exploitation of people with magic, and so the system I'm crafting is going to reflect that and mirror that.
I'm going to pull another question from the QA because it seems like it ties in, which is, what is your favorite example of lost and found power that you've read recently? For me, there's two, and one is Mia Tsai. I'm going to type this into the chat. Mia Tsai's Bitter Medicine. And that was kind of the origin of this panel, where I read that and I thought, I can't remember the last time where a heroine losing her magic was projected as a positive. And it is sort of connected to the romantic relationship because it mirrors stuff, but it's definitely like, it's more of a curse than a gift kind of a thing. And it is a way that people are going to exploit her. And the second one that's very recent is the new Sangu Mandana, where
oh, so good.
Yeah, where it becomes like, she's very much asking in that book, what does it mean to have so much power? And the answer is, nobody should have this level of control, full stop. And so the heroine ends up giving up her power in order to take away a similar level of power from somebody else. Spoilers, I guess, but still great.
Yeah, and that's A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, the second one.
Yeah. I really love Leslye Theron's Roaring Twenties trilogy. And there's it's a trilogy where it's all the same couple, these two men in the 1920s. And one of them, Sebastian, he starts out very, very powerful magically. And that's kind of an imbalance in their relationship. And then at one point in the trilogy, he ends up losing the power, and they have to sort of figure out how things are going in the relationship. And I wasn't sure I was going to be okay with him getting back the power, actually. Like, I wondered like what kind of message it was going to be, but actually the way it works at the end of the trilogy, I found personally incredibly satisfying. And I think also anyone who enjoyed Freya Marsk's, what is it called? Her trilogy of wonderful Edwardian romances.
The Last Binding.
That's right. I think anyone who enjoyed that should absolutely read Leslye Theron's The Roaring Twenties trilogy.
And she has a contemporary paranormal series right now where it's magic is based on like empathy, I think. And it's all about like feelings based. And one major character, one of the romantic leads, can't feel feelings. Like, and like the sequel's out and I'm like, how's she going to handle this? Like he's basically this big gray rock, non-reactive person. And that's partly why he's so scary and partly why he can't he doesn't quite fit in this magical world. And so it's an interesting question that it sounds like she's exploring from like many different angles.
I have been reading the Charm of Magpies series by KJ Charles, and that is like that's kind of standing out to me because there is a character with magic, but then there's this character who doesn't have magic, but together they create magic. And like it manifests in some very cool ways and like sexy ways and dark ways and things like that. So I felt that recently that was a series that I was just really diving into and enjoying the world building quite a bit.
I have one that's gaining magic, but not magic per se. It's This Kingdom Will Not Kill Me by Alona Andrews. It's basically a portal fantasy where the main female character falls into this, fantasy world, but she is a huge fan of the books. And so she knows what's going to happen. And so she uses her knowledge as power. But as she goes along and changes things, like it starts branching and diverging, and she has to struggle with that. And I mean, this book is incredible. It's not out until March, but that's one where I'm like, it's sort of not indistinguishable from magic because it's like she's psychic, except she just knows what's going to happen in the series. But her power wanes as things change and how she's going to have to deal with that. So it's really incredible.
And if you don't want to wait till March, similar vein, Sarah Reese Brennan's Long Live Evil.
Yes.
That's the other one.
I was obsessed with that book for a straight year. And the heroine has cancer and is like transported to her world into the villainous's body, basically right before she's about to be killed. And so same thing. She has all this, she literally declares herself a prophet and starts predicting things that are going to happen. So she uses that, but she is changing the story, of course. And I absolutely love it.
Devastating.
It's so good.
Definitely one of my favorite books of recently. And also Nalini saying, I gotta go there again. The last book she released was about this power, like with the group of people who it was killing them. Having it was breaking down their minds. They were losing their shields, and so they were exposed to the thoughts and feelings of like the entire freaking world. And the plot line was building something that would take that power away from them to protect them. And the way it was done was super interesting because they started using technology to try to make an accessibility device for these people so that they could live in the world. So that was sort of a cool use of losing power where it's not bad, it's good.
Suddenly it just occurred to me that the whole being exposed to everybody's thoughts and feelings all the time sounds like an really apt description of social media and why it drives you crazy.
Maybe that's why we're all so frazzled.
I was gonna say, Sarah Beth Durst, The Spell Shop, and the sequel. There's sort of a character, the Spell Shop one, it's this revolution has happened, and so she's kind of escaping this violence back to her hometown. And she's not allowed to practice magic technically. She was a librarian, but the islands have been abandoned and they require magic in order to be okay. So it's sort of acquiring magic and giving herself permission to practice magic when it's been forbidden from use by normal people. I really enjoyed those.
There's a book coming out later this month as well that deals with like that kind of after the crisis moment. Violet Thistlewaite is not a villain anymore. And one of the interesting things about it is the heroine. It's super fun. It's cute. There's a potted plant named Bartleby who keeps reaching for weapons. I love him.
He wasn't always a potted plant.
No, he wasn't originally a potted plant, which is why he's so mad. But the heroine in that one actually has two separate sources of power. And so it's a question of like, she's trying to decide which one she's able to draw on, and there's complexities that come up, and there's questions about the ethics of power when you used to be the right hand witch for an evil sorcerer and did terrible things at his behest, and now you just want to hang out and run a plant shop in a small town. But the dual sources of power was really striking for me.
I definitely want to read that one.
All right. Let's see, what else do we have in the Q&A?
I want to know what CL Polk's knitting.
I don't even really know what it is that I'm going to do. So right now what I'm doing is I'm knitting like this narrow strip and I'm knitting it on the bias. And
Oh,
it's actually a lot longer than I thought it was. So it's about 4 feet right now. I figure I'll get another 6 feet on it. And then I'm gonna pick up stitches on the side of my bias knit stockinette because it's like coiling up on itself. And I'm gonna use different colors to do
Nice.
stripes.
oh, that's gonna be
I
beautiful.
kind of just want a scarf that has color. I need to beat the winter blues, and also I want it to be cozy. So I'm knitting mohair because I like pain.
So soft.
And yeah, I just kind of keep it next to my desk and then I'll pick it up, and because the rows are so short, like look,
Wow.
it's really easy to just kind of do it and it gets longer really quickly. So when I do it sideways, it's going to be a little bit painful because it's going to take me forever to get one end to the other. I was thinking I have like a mustard yellow and I have like an apple green and I have like a
Ooh.
kind of a soft blue and a navy and like really dark gray, and I have a bright pink, and I'm going to put those on here somehow. I don't know how. I'm just kind of improvising.
Short rows?
Um Basically it's like bias, so it's knit one, yarn over, knit to the last two, knit two together, and then
Oh,
purl all the way across and then twist the
and
yarn
then,
over so it's a stitch made.
yeah.
Like really, really, really easy. Um I'm doing it because I need to take a break from this monster. I need to show people this because it's going to be really great, but it's also kind of demoralizing. I'm knitting a sweater and I'm knitting it out of like pretty traditional, like woolly, sheepy yarn. It's kind of heavy. I'm trying to find the right side because I'm doing it on circular needles. I don't know if you can see this texture,
Yeah.
but
That's
I
gorgeous.
am
Beautiful.
in love with this cable pattern. It looks really hard, but like it's not. You just have to kind of pay attention. It'll punish you if you're not paying attention.
Yeah.
And like I just got to the point where I was like, I need to I need a different hand motion for a while because the way this is set up is it's basically endless knit one, purl one ribbing all the way
Oof.
across. So I needed a little bit of a break. And now I'm kind of getting bored with the pink ribbon over here. So I figure once it gets to the length, I can go back to the big gray monster.
And knitting's a lot like writing in that it's tiny little bits that you just do one at a time, and then it adds up slowly over time. It's
Yeah.
that accumulation kind of thing.
Yes.
I went on a writing retreat the other week, and it was so useful to have my knitting at my desk because I'd write, and then I'd think, I have no idea what they do. Who knows? And so I'd pick up my knitting and I do a row and I do another row. And by the third row at the maximum, I always knew what was going to come next because it's something about it settles my brain.
Yeah. Yeah, you need something to do with your hands after the something to do with your mind for a little while.
Yeah. I should actually do more of that. When my brain is stuck, I should move my body. It would probably help. But most of the time I just sit here and pout when I don't know what to do.
I used to love hiking to get ideas, and then I got the ME and I was like, well, what do I do now when I'm stuck? And knitting, and similar things turned out to be the answer.
I find staring at water helps. And I'm not picky about what kind of water, like puddles work. I don't know why.
I initially was thinking like I just pictured like a glass of water and you just kind of stare at it, but like, I think like maybe like a body of water in
we've got a
sizes.
little creek like at the end of the driveway, and then there's the pool out back that, especially like in the rain, just staring at the raindrops hitting the pool tends to. Taking a bath is a really nice way to do it. Like anytime there's running water in a shower, my brain's like, time, now that you can't write something down, you're gonna have the best idea for dialogue.
100%.
Yeah, I know that my like caring for my wrists and my joints are really important. And so I wind up going to like different kinds of massage specialists in order to keep up like the hand, wrist, elbow, shoulder, neck, back, hip connection that could ruin my typing future if I don't. And the thing is that whenever I'm down on the table after a while, the brain kind of kicks in. It's like, you know what would be really awesome? This. You know what else would be awesome? This. Do you see how they tie together? Isn't it gorgeous? You're not going to remember any of this by the time you get dressed.
You need like a massage there, like like it's like somebody like a body worker and like a stenographer.
Yeah.
Just like leave your phone on record and then voice note everything.
Yeah. And a lot of it is maybe a lot of it is groaning because you're like and then also
and it's her brother. It's her brother.
Yeah.
I was watching a little making of video on the K-pop Demon Hunter soundtrack, and yeah, you're shocked at how many like actual melodies are just composed in voice note because like
on her way to the dentist.
On her way to the dentist, yeah, and she's like, "Oh, the melody should sound like this," and she sings it into the voice note, and then they're like playing the voice note for you, and you're like, "Oh yeah, that is the melody." All right, so one or two more questions. We have one from M. Elizabeth that is also something that somebody asked earlier. What is your upcoming project, your most recent project, or your project with the biggest lost and found power themes? And this one we are going to hear from everybody.
Okay, I'll start. My upcoming project, which is more along the gained magic side, is Silver and Blood. It comes out in January. It is the first book in a duology, and the second book is probably coming out next year too, although it hasn't been like officially dated. But that's my my upcoming project, Found Magic. What happens? A little bit of female rage, especially in the second book, with, you know, somebody said powered by spite a little bit. So
my next book that comes out next year actually does include Found Magic. I know there's some people who are on my newsletter and my podcast here. It has a new title, so I was calling it December 32nd. The title that the publisher has chosen is The Inevitable Undoing of Zahara Douglas. It comes out next August. It's my 1999 Y2K contemporary fantasy.
Yes.
And it's definitely found magic in there, so.
Nice.
Sounds good. Our next book is the second in our duology, Prince of Storms. It's the sequel to Daughter of Tides, and it is also big found magic, and then maybe not lost, but given up magic. Lots of choices about power in it, and it was the book that took us all year to write because this year was really hard. So it's later. It's going to be later than we hoped, but it's coming out in June next year. So it is done finally.
I've got my next book. Let's see, is my blur going to completely ruin it? I think it might, but you can't really see it. But I promise it's called Enchanting the Fae Queen.
Pretty.
So pretty.
It's beautiful.
And yeah, no particular lost or found magic in this one, but it's the sequel with starring a different couple, so they're each standalone. But to Wooing the Witch Queen, which has a lot about magical power. You know, women with big magical power, they don't have to give up when they get together with someone. And there is a found magic element that I cannot describe without being very spoilery, but I hope you'll enjoy it.
I have a current book out called The Sea Witch, which is about pirate witches in the Caribbean fighting the British Navy. And in this alternate world, it's like set in the 18th century. And in this alternate world, mages are, that is male magic users go to academies and they get placements in courts and on ships and things like that. And female and women who are born with power who are witches. It's basically like as if the Salem witch trials and all of those colonial witch trials were real. So it's like they get hunted, burnt, like hanged or drowned or burned. And it's about fighting back against this gendered power system. So, and it's available now. And it's actually my first romantasy. So I'm very excited about it.
And I just want to clarify, the Salem witch trials were actually real. It was just that the magic they thought.
Yes, I know. The Salem witch trials did happen. They legitimately happened and people were legitimately executed. But this is like, it's positing a world where the magic that they were speculating is real. So yeah, thank you for that clarification. I'm not a Salem witch trial denier.
Truther.
I don't know what to say about my book because it's still a secret. Okay, so I have a book coming out and I can't actually tell you what kind of a book it is or anything like that. But it's funny because the issue of like losing power and gaining power is kind of central to one of the most important characters in the books. That's their problem. And that problem basically drives all the dumb stuff they do. And I can't tell you anything else. I'm really hoping that, people are going to say it's okay, you can start telling people about this book now. Because I honestly can't wait. It has been a really long time and the suspense is killing me. But as soon as I can tell you what the book is, I will tell you what the book is.
And I'm just going to put in a plug for your Witchmark trilogy because I think that book is amazing in terms of various people with various power levels and also the structural uses of that power, like how the actual magical world exploits people with gifts within it. I think that's really fascinating.
Even the people who think that they have power and privilege are being exploited.
Yeah.
It's very like, the Kingston Cycles trilogy, there are 3 books. This might come as a surprise to people who have read the first book. There are 3 and they're out and they're all done and you can read them all.
And they're lovely. All right. Bree, have we heard from you on this? Am I just...
Yes.
Okay, good. Yes. I think I was reading the questions during that.
It's okay.
All right, I think we have time for one final question. So, any advice for other writers on creating characters with magical powers? Any big tips or tricks or secrets, places you start?
One thing I learned the hard way was for me to sort of have, like, as I'm creating it, because a lot of it's sort of like, what about this? What about that? And then like, I'm like, wait, what can they do again? So like, keeping note of like what certain powers are or how they're acquired or things like that. So having sort of like, for lack of a better term, a Bible as you're going, like, maybe during the generative phase, you don't necessarily need that. But like, for me, I was like, especially because there's a direct sequel to this, I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. I needed to keep track of that, didn't I? So doing that is that was just like on a technical level was something that was very helpful for me.
Yeah, the dossier, big thumbs up.
Yeah, I like dossier because that has non-denominational connotations.
I think for me, it's thinking about, what problems does the magic cause as well as solve? We often think about, oh, it's going to fix these things, but when it can actually cause some of the conflicts, it's just more interesting and more layered and you get more tension there. So try to make as many problems be caused by it as there are solutions solved by it.
It sort of ties in with what I was thinking in terms of what I like to read and write are like smart, often magically powerful people who are still, thrown over their heads. So like they can be magically powerful, but they can't be so magically powerful that actually there's no problem at all. Like that's okay because they can just use their magic and fix things and they're done. Like there's always going to be problems that it doesn't matter how powerful they are, their magic will not take care of them.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think having an idea of like what the problems they're going to face that they can't fix is good to start with. You don't want to give them more power. You don't want to, you don't want to do the equivalent of the everyone has a cell phone now in a mystery thing with magic. You don't want to give them powers that will fix the problems you're going to give them. And so that kind of means sometimes you have to think ahead. And if they are going to use that magic to fix a problem eventually in the end, I think it's good to make sure that you have laid the groundwork for that. Like it doesn't just come out of nowhere. All of a sudden they have a new power that's going to fix everything. And there's no reason you didn't have it, see it coming or anything. So
Like
I think
like
that
Batman's tool belt, like
Yes.
his utility belt thing.
Yeah.
Not tool belt, his utility belt. Like, oh, suddenly it's a batarang. What? Yeah. Sorry, go on, Bree.
no, that's a great example. I mean, you want to make sure that you sort of set up whatever you're going to do. And sometimes that means planning a little more than you might otherwise. Because I know not all of us are deep plotters.
Nope.
I'm not really like a big plotter. I like the story and the arc, not really the plot, but I've had to learn that I have to, know what the magic needs to be able to do. And like Leslye said, what conflicts it's going to cause as much as what it's going to fix. So I think that's more important than anybody telling you there has to be a rule system or whatever,
And I tend to disagree. Well, it's such a personal preference, but when you're learning to write science fiction and fantasy, you will come across many people, including very famous authors, who have many fans and are doing a great thing for themselves, but who will say magic must have rules. Everything must follow this exact thing. And I think then it's just science with a different name, like science in a different world. Like I want magic that feels magical and numinous and sense of wonder. I don't want magic that feels like a scientist.
Well, I think they're
like
Sorry,
I was gonna say I have a work in progress that I'm working on, but like I'm struggling with, and that's part of the thing is that these people have figured out magic so thoroughly that it's a white collar job,
That's fun.
and that like part of the problem that I'm having with it is that it's such a bummer to have magic that is like basically I'm going to
engineering.
claw my way up to middle management with this with this incredible power that I'm able to wield. Like it makes me a little bit sad. Um but like I would say then when it comes to like writing magic in books, one of the things that I do is I actually sit down and I have rather dry kind of written screeds about the problem that I have with the assumptions about magic and what it can do, and about magic users and the reason why they get magic and whether or not they deserve to have it. And I will just basically go into like everything that I don't like about people having magic powers and like my personal problem with it. And then I find the one that makes me the most infuriated. And I use that one um when I'm actually figuring out how the magic works in my world. Um the other thing that I do is I'm thinking like if I am working on a system with hereditary magic, I promise you it's about to get pretty dark. But I think about like if magic is hereditary, what is it in the body that makes that possible to do magic? And what does that mean on a basic level?
Mhm.
Like they're obviously expending some kind of like kinetic energy in order to do magic. And you will notice like in the Kingston cycle that everybody who can do magic is basically they all have the metabolisms of 15-year-old boys. They never stop eating.
Yeah.
Ever. Because I'm thinking, it comes from your brain. Your brain uses a lot of calories. You have to have a lot of glucose in your system, which basically means you will know that you have found a mage in hiding because their grocery bills are enormous. And I just find these weird little details like that, and I'm just like, oh yeah, that's cool. I'm gonna put that in. The other thing that I do is I like to follow the path of, oh, I just had a horrifying thought.
Yes.
And if it makes me grin like the Grinch, it's going in the book.
we're all a little evil, I think.
Well, I feel like sometimes like I I feel like, what's the scariest, worst possible outcome for this scenario, and then let's go that way. Like I want to like lean into the worst case scenario, because that provides like on-camera drama as well as character growth and development. They get to face certain things about themselves or learn things about themselves, and it provides sort of a more visceral reading experience.
That's something I've been struggling with for a while. I really like the idea of like love potions as a story mechanic, and I really want to like do something interesting in that space, but I haven't found a way to do it that doesn't lead immediately to creepy, horrifying like things that I really just don't want to get into.
Right.
I'm like, no, this would be really fun, like, your classic like Midsummer Night's Dream level comedy, but every time I'm like, no, you got to commit to the bit, and this is terrifying. And like, maybe Shakespeare could have a really good comedy come out of it, but I'm like, no, if I as soon as I start touching it, it turns creepy real fast.
I had an
like
idea
a horror.
But I had an idea, Olivia, but we can talk about it later.
Talking to other writers sometimes solves your problem.
Right.
Oh, this is only
yeah,
tangential.
I'm going to talk to you about that later. I just like things are connected. I think we can fix you.
We'll get an anthology together.
A love potion anthology.
Ooh.
Yeah.
You heard it here first, folks.
I just want to say, like, I spent my whole life reading romances, and then I sort of came at it from the side angle as a writer, where I actually, I intended to start out by writing these very romantic historical fantasies. I got an agent. The book almost got published. It didn't. I went into, despair. I started writing kids' books instead. And then I came back, finally, like 10 years after first publication, I'm finally writing, romances again. And one of the things I had to do was actually, in response to having gone through these very serious writing workshops and all this stuff, it was like, think about, okay, what do I love in romance? And I need to stop holding myself back, because when I'm reading, there's this line they used to use in Smart Bitches Trashy Books, like about the crazy sauce element, like where you're flipping the pages, thinking, oh, no, not real. They wouldn't go there.
The bonkers.
I have to stop being worried about impressing people. I need to go for it.
Yeah. I came from like a workshop background, and it was like Raymond Carver was like the ideal of like what your work was, and I was like secretly writing romance at the same time, and I never told anybody about it, because it was like this was not and it was like, but it's what gave me joy, you know what I mean? It gave me the jouissance of the writing. Like that's where it came from, was in this kind of just like, okay, and then the handsome Irish captain has to take her across the country to do, I wrote this over the summer instead of working on my master's thesis, so it's like I'm like tucked away in this little, so it's like that kind of thing. Like you just like give yourself that permission to kind of like take the safeties off and just like go for it.
Yeah, there's a reason that like write what you love is a saying that it's because whatever brings you joy and whatever you like gives you that spark and that sparkle, like it doesn't, as Stephanie was saying, your magic doesn't have to have a million rules if that's not what's bringing you joy. If you don't want to have like a million whatever, it's okay to just go with vibes. Just like do what makes you happy and trust that there's an audience, because they're so wide of an audience. Like someone will find your people.
On top of which, the market is unpredictable. The only thing we have control over is the writing process itself. You don't know what is going to happen at the end. So why not please yourself at that moment? Because this could be all you've got. I mean, I faced that many times. So it's like, here, it's me and the manuscript, and then we're going to have a good time together.
Yeah, and also, sorry.
I was going to say, there's another thing too, and that is like, several years ago, I, went to my very first Nebula conference, and I met the person who was going to get the special Grandmaster Award, and I was in a conversation with them. And of course, because they're getting a Grandmaster Award, they've had a very long and storied career. And what I said to them was like, I got started with your very first book. That book actually meant a lot to me. It actually changed the way that I saw the world. You changed my future because I read that book. And their response was, that was kind of a young man's book. I was like, I was a young person when I read it. And in that moment, I knew that I never, ever, ever wanted my very first reaction to be like, if somebody came to talk to me about the very first book that I ever wrote or any other book that I wrote. I wanted to be ready to get down and geek out about it. I don't care. I'm 100 years old. I'm going to talk to you about Witchmark. And I'm going to tell you that like everybody rides bicycles because I was like a bicycle activist at the time, and I was like deeply into bicycle transportation. And that the thing about the apple trees was like me basically being like, why don't we have public trees that are fruit bearing? Why don't we do that? And like just like these dumb little details. I am ready to go at it. Like 100 years old, I will talk to you about Witchmark, and I will love that book as much as I loved it when I first sent it out.
Every book we write is someone's favorite book and someone's least favorite book. But like, I think that's the thing to remember. It doesn't matter how much you think it failed. Someone out there loves it. And like, I think that remembering that you should not dismiss their love, because to them, that is so important. You know, it can be hard because like all of us have been in this game a while now. And you know, there's stuff I wrote 18 years ago that I would not write now. But people love that. And, you know, I love the excitement that I felt when I was writing it, even if it's messy now.
I remember being at a book fair once, and it was at a conference, so everybody had name tags, and a woman came up and was saying she'd read like my latest and had really like enjoyed it. And I looked down at her name tag and it said Karen Harbaugh, and I lost it. This woman was writing signet romance in the 1990s, and she was putting the Greek gods in Regency England and giving them romances, and like reincarnation came up, and like that book broke my brain. I'm like, you can do this? This is allowed? This will get published? Are you kidding me? I didn't know we were allowed. And so like literally life-changing. And so this woman was like, oh yeah, I think your book is great. And I'm like, your book was one of the most important things I've ever read. Are you kidding me? Can I email you? And it was such a good time. And it was just like this, it was this incredible moment. And I think that's really why we do what we do, is as readers, we found something in a book sometime. And as writers, we're always putting stuff in books, hoping that somebody else will reach out and pick it up.
Yes.
And on that note, Billy, I think, are we approaching our time, our cutoff?
You are, we're 2 minutes short of 1:30. Well, 1:30 our time, 4:30 for anybody on the East Coast. So yes, I guess we probably should wrap this up. I want to thank everybody for being in the audience today. Thank you to all of our authors being a part of this discussion. I have tried to keep up with all of the other authors and books that have been mentioned. I have a document going, and we'll share as many of them as I actually caught with all of you when I send out the follow-up email, which will also include a link to the recording for this session. So thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. Really grateful. I love being able to do these kind of off-season events. Thank you to Olivia, Leslye, Jessie, CL, Eva, Bree, and Stephanie for being part of this. Have a great afternoon, everyone, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you.